Great. Welcome, everyone. We are excited you are all joining us for today's Kira Chat with a very special guest speaker. First, a little bit about Kira. Kira is a career accelerator. We help first gen and early career launch and build their careers faster. We host monthly Kira Chats and invite speakers to share their stories about their career journey. We help Kira community grow their knowledge and confidence and build their network and resources as they navigate next steps for their career. Welcome, Jazmin Diaz. So happy to have you here today. Jazmin is a founder and CEO of Flourish LLC, a leadership coaching and development company dedicated to empowering individuals to thrive in both their life and career. With over 25 years of professional experience spanning public education and high-growth tech companies, Jazmin is known for her strategic insights and ability to transform challenges into opportunities. Jazmin is the author of Ignite Your Growth, Perspectives and Tactics to Flourish in Life and Career. I was just grabbing my book too, which offers actionable insights to help others unlock their full potential. I had the pleasure of reading Jazmin's book. We met on Friday and I told her this is a book that is both comprehensive and yet digestible. It's a guide that I wish I had when I was first starting my career. So thank you for doing this. And it's never too late. We are all learning from this. So this is amazing. Thank you. So before we get started, for everyone that is joining today, we will be selecting a lucky winner to receive a copy of Jazmin's book. So you'll hear from us by the end of day today. Welcome, Jazmin. Oh my goodness, so happy to have you here today. So much to talk about. And what I'd love to do is let's just start about, learning a little bit more about you. Adding to your inspiring career, we can now include author. So you're now author of your first book. Congratulations, this is huge. We want to learn more about you first. So tell us about where you grew up and maybe 1 to 2 key challenges or experiences that really shaped you.
Yeah, thank you. Before jumping in, I do want to just express my deep gratitude, Sylvia, to you and Jen and Kira for having me on today to speak about the book and share some of the insights that you referenced. So, with that, yes, I will share that I was born here in California in a city named Mountain View. And early as a toddler, I ended up moving to a small town in the state of Jalisco in Mexico with my mom and my grandparents who pretty much, partook in raising me with my mom. So for me, that when I look back, that chapter, that time was really special as the town of Degollado. It was a place where I was exposed and was able to embrace so much rich culture, Mexican culture. I made some amazing bonds with family, some friends, that there was a true sense of community and a very special time for me. So I got to go to school there up until the age of 9 before I came back to the States. So Degollado, Jalisco is where I was raised early on and then came back to Sunnyvale. And then we can jump into some more fun facts there.
Great. I love that. So tell me a little bit about some of those key challenges that you experienced. 9 years old, coming, and really kind of trying to find your way. How did that impact your early career?
Yeah, so coming back at the age of 9, I try to remember, I remember feeling excited when I learned that we were going to come back and stay here for good.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't anticipate the challenges that came with that. And one of them, the big standout was having to kind of reassimilate and re-immerse myself in the American culture. And a big part of that, when I say it, is the English language. So I had to, as much as, my aunts and family members send me videotapes of shows and movies to kind of maintain the English, it was hard. So I had to relearn English. And I actually will say English was my second language because I had to learn everything, vocabulary, grammar, just spelling, how to put sentences together. And it was a really difficult time. But, thank God I was able to to grasp it all. And, little by little and with time, I was able to adapt and grasp the concepts and do well in my elementary, middle school, and high school years with school.
Okay. Tell us about your first job.
My first job was at a place that I think a lot of the audience will know, Big Golden Arches, a place that we know as McDonald's.
Well, has the best
And
fries.
yes, 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 Big Mac and French fries, can't go wrong. And believe it or not, at that time, the cost of living was a lot cheaper, right, than now, and my wage was 4.25 an hour. So it just kind of paints a picture of where we were in the economic times back then.
Mhm.
But that was really a place that, taught me a lot about customer service and just interacting with people and understanding a business model and all the things that I really needed in terms of just job experience. And then from there, as a young teen, I was 14 when I had that job. I went to retail, and ultimately, I stayed there up until I was 18 years of age, an adult.
Okay, thank you for sharing. It's always fun to hear people's first job experiences because they serve a purpose, sure, at the time, but also they help kind of shape a little bit of what we do later, right? And what we don't want to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was fun. I worked with friends and saw, it was in the city I lived, so I would see, family, other relationships that I had come through the McDonald's, and it was always fun to just say hello and mess around at the same time.
Have a little fun. I love
Yeah.
that. Great, great. I love that. Okay. So I know that you got your start in education and
Mhm,
then you made a big career transition into tech. So
mhm.
no matter how long someone has been in their career, there are times where you either want or need to make a career transition. And even for early career, you may be starting somewhere and then either it's not working out or you're unhappy, or there might be another reason to have to make a change. So, what would you say are the biggest 1 to 3 pieces of advice you have for anyone that might want to explore moving in a different direction?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, when I mentioned that up until the age of 18, I was in, these retail food industry jobs. I jumped into the school district, and that was uh, an amazing chapter for me in the sense that it offered what I needed as a young mother. At the time that I was at the district, my husband and I were also raising our 4 children. So the district provided, financial stability. I was also continuing to develop myself as a professional. I had an amazing opportunity to make some deep connections within my own community, meeting families, establishing relationships with the youth, and being really um, mentor and coach, if you will, early on without knowing that that's what it was in those days.
Mhm,
But then there did come that moment that you're asking about, which was that decision of pivoting.
mhm,
And as scary as it was at the time, I do recall I was very fearful of the failure, that could potentially come with a pivot. But I knew ultimately that this was the route that I needed to take to provide better means, better financial opportunity for our kids, along with my husband. So I think for me, what it really came down to was, sort of what I just said about myself was identifying the why. So I would
mm,
encourage anyone who's thinking about pivoting is understand your why. Why is it that you're wanting to make this change? Is it because you're tired, you're burnt out, stagnation, or boredom, or like what is it that is driving you to make this change? And I say that because I think that when you understand what that why is, that clarity really gives you that purpose and that drive to figure out what are those opportunities that you're going to want to pursue. And I think more importantly is that why also, typically aligns with your goals, your values, and
mhm.
that purpose. So I would start with identify the why. Why do you want to make the move? The
Has-
sec Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
Sorry. And then the second thing would be, defining the goal. So once, you've kind of gone through this, the why, the purpose, and what is it that you're going to go pursue, it's what is the goal? So say that your goal is to, be I don't know, a sales representative at a big company, and currently you're maybe a shipping and receiving or logistics, professional. Define the goal. What are you going to need to do to attain that? Do you have, the training or the skills that are required to do that. So it's going to be a lot of reflection and really looking at what skills you have that are transferable or the new ones that you're going to need to develop. And then next would come the action plan, right? So now you know what you need to do, but then it's okay, well, when are you going to do it? And what does that take? What does that require? And I think that a big part of that is also thinking about a support system, because I am a true believer that we don't ever do this alone. So I think it's so important to, surround yourself with people who are going to support your goals, your aspirations, people that are going to build you up, mentors, sponsors, coaches. And then I think also, with that comes in the power of networking, which is a chapter in my book too. It's, have conversations. That role that you're trying to pursue. In this example, I'm saying like a sales representative, find those people, those experts that you can maybe have a conversation to pick their brain and get their insights about what the role really is, to understand that, is this what I want to do? And does this sound like something that I want to, do as my next step in my career? And then lastly, stay encouraged. Like it will, take a lot of effort, a lot of work, but stay encouraged, stay persistent, even when the going gets tough. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be things that maybe don't go according to that action plan timeline, or hiccups along the way. But I would just say stay encouraged, persistent, and don't stop believing in yourself, because it is possible to achieve.
I love that, Jasmine. Thank you for the structure that you're sharing with everyone here, how you did it. And what comes to mind for me is you're right, that internal why, staying connected to that and understanding what's driving that. I
Mhm.
think sometimes what happens is there's a lot of noise and pressure, external pressure, all the shoulds,
Yeah.
right? And so, or I want to make a big change. Yes, it's scary. How do what can you share with the audience about, okay, my internal why is really strong and I can lean into my support system, but there's a lot of noise and pressure.
Yeah.
How do I reconcile the two?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes back to, again, just, doing what's right for you and staying on the course. Another chapter of the book is, and that's actually the starting chapter that I lead with, chapter 1, which is defining success.
Mm-hmm.
Defining success is very unique, very personal and intimate from individual to individual. So I think that, when you know what is it that you feel is going to make you happy, what is going to bring you that fulfillment, once you've identified that, you're going to hear noise. You're going to have, as they say nowadays, you're going to have haters, the
Mm-hmm.
doubters. You might be against all odds, but that's where I come back to, what? Believe in yourself. And if you know that this is what's right for you, you feel it in your core, you have a calling, whatever it is, like stick with it and don't let the voices of negativity or discouragement distract you from staying focused on what it is that you're trying to do.
I love that because everyone's journey is different. What everyone wants or why it's important to them is their own reason, their
Yeah.
own why versus what we see out there or colleagues or, and the comparison game can be really tough. So thank you for sharing that. And what a
Yeah.
great way to kick off your book. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that because I really want to shift into your book and some of my favorite chapters.
Hmm.
Um, so in your book, I'm going to go ahead and in
Hmm.
your book, you share actionable and empowering insights throughout. So when I think about the early career space, some of my favorite chapters are the ones that no one talks about enough. So I really want to hone in on some of that. So
Hmm.
let's start with chapter 2. So mindset, growth versus fixed. We sometimes want to stay comfortable in some situations, and often because there's fear or our upbringing or an experience that we may have had. Was there a pivotal moment that challenged you going from a fixed mindset to more of a growth mindset? Like, where was that kind of bigger growth? What did you learn?
Yeah, yeah, I'm absolutely guilty of having had a fixed mindset earlier in my life. And I think for me, being able to kind of shift from fixed to growth came with maturity and experience, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, I do believe life is exactly that. It's experience.
Mhm,
And going through it, or actually growing through it, is what I also like to think,
mhm,
is what really empowered me to adopt a growth mindset.
mhm,
And I think for me growing up, there were nuances of that victim seeing, oh, my circumstances, maybe that's not for me, or I didn't go through a formal, education through university. I can't do that, having a pity party almost, right?
Mhm.
But then there came a time where it's like, no, I'm smart. I'm capable. I have skill sets that are absolutely valuable and contribute and can add value. What can I do with that? And then it's, deploying curiosity. Someone with a fixed mindset, tends to think limited, sort of how I used to think earlier on, is you start thinking very limited. And when you activate this growth mentality or mindset, it's let me be curious, let me ask questions, let me find out how. Let me, activate all the things that need to come with developing myself to really have this more mature growth mindset of learning and wanting to evolve and grow as an individual and also as a professional.
Absolutely. And it's not easy to do, right? So what are
Yeah.
some of the tips that you can share with everyone here when we're kind of getting stuck in our fixed? What are
Yeah.
some things that you do to remind yourself to move into growth?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll say, like if you have access, for those on the call, to feedback surveys. I think there's some like the 360 or just open conversations with whether it's a peer, your manager, a mentor, a coach, someone that potentially has a little more experience than you, that you could have a real honest and open conversation, or like I said, use a survey.
Mhm,
I think
mhm,
that's a really good tool because it gives you feedback, and feedback really is a gift. I've learned that myself firsthand when I talk about, I see myself as being immature with that fixed mindset to then maturing into that growth mindset. But when you can get that feedback and then really kind of, go through it and digest it in a way that you're not taking it personal and it's meant to be interpreted for yourself to find those areas of development and apply whatever practices you need to grow them. I think that has really helped me a lot. And then it's always reflecting in those hard situations where, I think that when we are in environments or situations, for me early on, you see someone shining or having that moment, and you almost feel the natural response is to feel like threatened, right? Like, oh, they're smarter, or oh, they're gonna, compete with me for this or for that. Instead, it's more of like, huh, damn, they are smart. But you know what? I'm going to go and befriend them and see what I can learn or what insights I can take that then I can apply to myself in my own way to help me continue to elevate and climb as a, again, lifelong learner.
Yeah, I love that, and it's not about comparison, competition, they're doing it, better, therefore I can't. It's kind of I'm
Mhm.
hearing learning from them and then finding your own way too, and practicing, getting some of the feedback because it's not easy to hear, right? And everyone delivers it differently, but as long as you're practicing getting that feedback, I think it's just good. We get better at it too, better
Yeah.
at receiving it. I love that. That's a great tip.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hmm.
Great, great. Okay. Let's move on to chapter 9. This is very, I love this one. Navigating workplace relationships, colleagues versus friends. So, not all relationships are created equal. For professional relationships, one thing you talk about is being selective about what you share because not everyone is going to respect that. Can you give us an example of a challenge you've experienced and advice for how to handle that?
Yes. Oh, I have so many examples, but I will start with the quote that is actually in chapter 9. And it's your work bestie today might be your competition tomorrow. So let that soak in for a moment because there's a lot of truth to that, right? And so I think that, in the workplace, we develop relationships over time. And I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't have friends and at work and trust them as a friendly. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that at all. I'm saying go ahead and do that, but just don't lose sight that this person could ultimately be a competitor, or you both could be up for the same opportunities, and then things may go sideways, right? Because of that aspiration or that attempt to achieve those career goals. So, for me, there was a point in my career where internally, I was pursuing a job opportunity, and I have a lot of, work friends, but I was very intentional about not wanting to share it or broadcast it because I didn't know if someone else was going to try to put their name in the hat as well, and then now I have more competition to deal with, right? And then later there was someone that I told, and then sure enough, this person that I told, I thought was really a friend. So
Mm,
then later I found out that this person also put their name in the hat for the job and didn't tell me. And then
mm,
I thought, wow, like this is why you can't assume that your work friends are like your real friends, that you grew up with or your friends outside of work, because this person absolutely went for the role. Long story short, neither one of us got it, but
mm,
that definitely changed the relationship, moving forward, because now it was like, okay, you pretty much just snaked me. I shared what I was doing with you, and you took it as an opportunity to go and, pursue it to elevate yourself,
yeah.
without telling me. So I do say, just be cautious in
Mhm,
terms of oversharing what you're doing. And I think that goes for other things too, like, projects or inside information that you may have. You never know how someone else might use it to get themselves ahead or to use it to their advantage, which ultimately can hurt you as a professional as well. So, this chapter is really meant to just say, like, yeah, work friends are great. You should have them, socialize. They're a good outlet when the things are tough at work, and, chit chat, water cooler talk, but be mindful of what you share.
I love that. Protect what you have, your skills, your experience, the direction
Mhm.
you're moving toward. That is so great. How, and it's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
So you give such a great example of what happened here.
Mhm.
How do you recover from that? In other words, it may have changed the dynamic with the relationship with that person. Did you have a conversation about it? Like, what really happened after that? Or was it just kind of awkward? What
Yeah, no, no. I had to have a conversation because it
Okay.
was I was over rotating it on it,
Uh-huh.
in the sense of like, I can't believe this person did that, you know? And then it was like, you know what? I'm just gonna throw a meeting on the calendar and we're gonna talk. And I
Okay.
dealt with it head on. Cordial hello, how's it going? And then it's like, I put time on the calendar because I need to get something off my chest.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was received pretty well. I was ready for this person to almost take the defensive uh,
Mm,
response with me,
okay.
but this person listened, and I think after understanding kind of, my disappointment, and I think understanding that I held this person to a higher regard as a friendly,
Mm,
it was like, you hurt me,
right.
and we talked it out. Apologies were given like profusely. We moved
Mhm.
forward as professionals, but I never, ever, ever trusted this person the same way again.
Yeah. Well, I'm really encouraged to hear how you addressed it, because sometimes silence, things grow in silence. So thank you for sharing how you handle that, because I think we could all learn from that.
Yeah.
Great, great. So I love Lupe. You have a great question here. Let's pause for a moment and take your question. So you shared, how do you work toward finding your purpose? How did you personally feel that this was your calling as you navigated your life and career? What helped you clarify this?
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm thinking about like when I made the decision to pivot, my
Hmm.
purpose and my husband's, quite frankly, was we wanted to provide a better life and financial stability to offer our kids better opportunities than we had growing up. My husband and I grew up very similarly, raised by our grandparents. Neither one of us went to a 4-year university. So we've been grinding, working really, really hard. And a commitment we made to each other as partners was whatever it takes, we are determined to ensure that our kids have everything that we didn't, from a raising perspective, changing some of the generational thoughts and process, and some of those cycles that we felt that we wanted to break. And that included the financial stability so that our kids could have better opportunities, in the sense of, you want to go to, be in after school sports, you want to be in summer camps to learn about, this or that. And whatever that was really our drive. And that absolutely was my purpose, was, being a mom that could get to new heights to provide better for our family.
Yeah, so I'm hearing there was this bigger thing, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that purpose can change?
Absolutely, it can. It
Mm,
changed for me again, after with the book pretty much. My kids are older now, so then it's okay, what do I want to do now, right? So I was laid off mid last year, and it took some, thinking and soul searching, a lot of what I thought about, like what's next? What am I going to do? What do I want to do? And then I realized, our kids are grown now. They're more independent. They're self-sufficient. They don't need mom and dad as much anymore.
mhm,
We did what we set out to do as parents, to raise them and give them all that they need to be successful. So then for me, it was, I want to launch my business, Flourish, which I did. And I'm
mhm.
going to finish this book that really was 5 years in the making. And I did. So, absolutely purpose can change. I think timing is everything. And that's also a big consideration for me, when I was trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do next? And is right now the right time?
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for your question, Lupe.
Mhm.
All right. I would love to go to chapter 13, self-regulation. Ooh, this one. There will always be difficult workplace situations, right? Personalities you have to deal with. Can you tell us what it means to self-regulate? How do you use that?
Yeah, self-regulation is something I've learned about in recent years and have adopted in recent years as well. And I really see this as a active and constant practice. It's never ending. And I use it, at home, social circles, at work, day in, day out. It's a 24/7 practice. And I like to think of it as, if I had explained, like, what is that self-regulation? It's really emotional management of yourself.
Mm,
And what I mean by that, it's really having the ability to keep yourself in check, especially in those really hard moments or difficult situations, maybe when, someone's offended you or said something in a meeting that you didn't appreciate, or you had expectations of something and it didn't go according to plan. It's really being able to manage your physical cues as well, or your nonverbal cues, as well as your physical ones. So that's what self-regulation is. And like I said, it is a constant and active practice. It's never ending. And whenever I have found myself in those hard situations where, say, I was offended,
mhm,
it's having that ability, again, very aware within myself, to just, like, take a breath, not going to respond in the moment, take a quick pause. The brain's an amazing muscle. It can help us think quickly, get on your feet, and then respond appropriately. But it's really giving yourself that breath, that pause, to figure out the appropriate response. Or maybe it's not a response in that moment, and having the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to deal with this privately with that individual later.
I love that. A reminder to pause and slow down because there's heated moments, and sometimes the way we respond, maybe outside of work, may not be the same as
Mm,
in the workplace. So I love that, taking the time to kind of slow it down and think, okay, what's important for me to share right now? How do I respond? Or do I even need to respond?
yeah.
Right? Maybe it's calling for just enough space to say, okay, maybe not now, but later. But
Yeah.
that's a great reminder. So in that moment, what is one little tip you can give to everyone here? Just that quick, like, prompt or thing that we can remind ourselves of when we're kind of feeling ourselves getting kind of worked up, or,
Yeah.
or even just frazzled, right? Like that moment.
Yeah, I think it's taking that breath and that pause. It really, it serves you well. Just take that breath, think it through. What do I need to do in this moment? Do I need to do anything in this moment?
Mhm.
It's a little self-talk, and it
Right.
happens very quickly, right? Like I said, the brain is a powerful muscle, so it does happen all very quickly. But it's having that ability to call yourself out, like, wait a minute, what are we gonna do right now?
Right.
Talking with yourself and then going from there.
Yes, I love that. The gift of space. Okay, I'm going
Mhm.
to pause there for a moment. I have more questions, but I would love to
Oh.
open it up to everyone and see if there are any questions from the group here.
Mhm.
All right, let's continue in the meantime. Feel free to raise your hand or add your question to the chat as well.
Mhm.
All right. Chapter 14,
Mhm.
advocating for yourself and negotiating. This is a tough one for many, and it
Yeah.
can really feel overwhelming. What are your top few tips for how to do, like, what does it mean to advocate for yourself, and how do you do it? Where do you even begin?
Yeah, advocating and negotiating, this was a new skill that I had to learn and develop.
Mhm.
Especially, growing up, Mexican American, by my grandparents. So there was generational disconnect. And I was raised and taught to, be grateful for having a job. Be
Mm,
grateful, don't ask for things, do good work, show up early, stay late, take on whatever opportunities
mm,
come with the job. And they'll eventually recognize you for it, or they'll eventually notice, and eventually you'll be rewarded. Well, in the corporate space, I wouldn't say so much in the district space because that's a very different sort of like model in the sense of how things are done and salary compensation, all the levers that you can pull for those rewards. But I quickly realized that when I jumped into tech, all those things that I was taught were not going to help me. And I say that in the sense that around me, I started to notice professionals, asking for what it is that they wanted. I started hearing conversations about offers we were making to candidates and candidates coming back with wanting more salary, wanting more bonus, or offsetting with more stock. And all of this was like light bulbs for me, because I thought, oh my gosh, you could do that. Or, oh, wow, these people are bold. Like they're asking for things. So I
mm.
started to notice that, I needed to make a change, that the way that I was raised and taught was not going to serve me well if I wanted to be financially rewarded for the work that I was doing, and also to potentially get more opportunities. Um, so so yes, so I had to, like I said, adapt and learn these new skill sets. And I quickly learned that it is very important to advocate for yourself, or your team if you're a manager too. If we have any managers on the call, right, you might need to advocate for your team. Maybe it's going after a project, or you need more time for a project, whatever those things are. Getting comfortable with advocacy is super important, whether you're early in career, like I said, a manager, senior executive. I think advocacy is a really important and great skill to have.
I love that because you share some really clear examples of what it means when you're getting the job, right? Asking for more, a bonus, or certain benefits. But what about when you're in your role? Let's say after a year or two, what what are different ways we should be advocating for ourselves that maybe we're forgetting?
Yeah, so there's many, many. I can share a few, but I want to actually share one example of, I talked about all these light bulbs going on as I spent more time in the tech space or the corporate world. And there was one example that stands out to me, and it was so powerful that it really kind of lit that fire of like, I need to get, comfortable with advocating and negotiating for myself. And there was this time that I was at my cubicle working, and we had a meeting, earlier on about some stuff some projects and things that were happening in the company. And a senior executive was crossing paths with another fellow leader in the organization, and the executive told this individual something about like, hey, how time sensitive this is. It's a real critical project with some of our biggest customers. I'd really like, I think you'd be the great person to kind of, take lead on this project and program to ensure its success. And I'm there, ear hustling a little bit. And this individual, his response was, "Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you so much. Let me set up time so that I can understand the scope of this and what that means from a compensation perspective and timing." And as I'm hearing this, I thought, wow, at this point in my career, at least, 12 years, I have volunteered for so many projects, for so many extra duties and so many things, and never once did it occur to me to say, hey, is there extra for this? Or, hey, what does that look like from a compensation perspective? Or is there maybe new tasks now that I should drop so that I can focus on this? So that advocacy can look in many different ways depending on your role and what those things that are being asked of you are. But that was a really big, powerful moment for me, like I said, as a learning lesson.
Oh my gosh, we have a question from Lupe, but before we jump to you, Lupe, one thing I want to add to what you just shared was so many times we take more on, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said. One is there, what does the compensation look for taking this on? And then two, what do I need to drop? And what
Mm-hmm.
a great reminder, because back to what you said earlier, we're so used to saying yes to all the things and
Mm-hmm.
we take more on, but we never stop to think, one, how the compensation, right? What could that look like, or
Yeah.
reward, but also kind of throwing it out there about prioritization, because we just keep saying yes, 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 and we keep adding, and we don't really think about how that affects our quality into this new
Mm-hmm.
project and what we do in the contributions. And so, what a great reminder, even just to invite the conversation and say, okay, let's talk about priorities here,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that you can succeed and do really great on that. I love that. What a great tip. Okay, great, great. Lupe, question.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. Definitely great reminder because I think like a lot of the times you just get thrown on so many things, and it's like, well, if you want me to do something else, it's like I have to drop something, otherwise
Mm-hmm.
it's not looking good already. But going into my question, I'm going back into kind of the earlier uh, instance of the chat. You mentioned growth or fixed versus growth mindset. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective, Jasmine, how you kind of implement that within your daily life, maybe outside of the scope of work. Like once it kind of dawned on you that you were building this bigger mindset, I mean, are there any instances or examples that you kind of internalized it within that you could share that really helped kind of prolong that mindset, if you will?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking, Lupe. So I think, for me, as I mentioned, I think of myself as immature earlier on, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just the reality. You don't know what you don't know. And I think early on in my career, when I saw folks around me that, I perceived as being so smart and knowing all the things and being really good at what they did, I remember feeling a level of feeling less than or threatened or envious, and wasn't sure where that came from. Maybe it was my own insecurities. But I think once I got to the moment in my life when I was able to recognize that, so kind of tying this back to like that self-regulation, self-awareness, once I was able to recognize and acknowledge those feelings while they were happening, it was like, no, 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 Jasmine, what are you going to do? This is great. Are you going to have this pity party and sit here being insecure? Or is this now an opportunity to go and learn? And by learning, there's so many ways that I could do that. And I have applied those throughout my life, and I still do. It's in those moments, depending on the scenario, it's a maybe I go and reach out to this individual separately, one-on-one, and say, hey, I really like what you said in that meeting about this and that. I'd love to learn more. Could you share some time with me to walk me through it? Or if it's a group discussion, it's asking questions and really being curious and not seeing curiosity or not knowing as a negative. I think asking these questions is a strength, not a weakness. And no one knows it all. So anyone who is smarter or you think is smarter has taken a lot of these steps to get to where they are. And I think that, equally so, we have to do that for ourselves as well so that we can continue to evolve and grow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jasmine. Any other questions? All right, let's talk about chapter 6, the power of saying no. But I'd like to add chapter 21, mastering your mental and social space, because I love the synergy between some of the chapters. And as I was reading, I thought, oh, it's almost like I needed a diagram. Oh, let me go back to self-regulation for this one, right? So there was
Yeah.
a lot of really cool kind of, the power of twos here. One thing we don't talk about enough is the importance of saying no, and then who you have in your circle. And Jasmine, you and I talked about this when we met for coffee recently. For
Yeah.
some of us, culturally, that can feel really challenging, right? What can you tell us about setting boundaries or things we should consider?
Yeah, I think the power of saying no for me, this chapter came from a point in my life where I found myself very overwhelmed And that feeling of being spread too thin started to impact my mental health in a negative way. So you're absolutely right. Like these two chapters, I think they go hand in hand, because we need to be very mindful about, preserving our mental health, and also being a little bit selfish and it not be seen as a negative, right? So I think that it is a challenging thing, but I think that once you get into the habit of exercising the no a little bit more, and when I say no, it doesn't mean no, no. You can be graceful about it, and depending on the person, the scenario, the circumstance, you're going to tailor it accordingly, right? But I think, something, I think you said this earlier on, Sylvia, in the previous conversation that we were having, like for every yes that you say that doesn't align with the values or your priorities or your goals, that means that you're saying no to those things.
Mm.
So I think for me, a lot of that no, when I had to kind of like reset, when I had this breaking point, it was, I need to focus on what I need to do. I'm going to focus on me, my priorities, my career, my kids, my family, and everything extra. When I'm asked, I will assess it. If I have the time, I will do it. But if not, I'm not going to do it. And it absolutely came down to preserving my mental health, because I soon realized that if my mental health was deteriorating or not at its best, I was good to nobody. And that especially was true for that nobody, like, or that person being myself, right? I needed to show up as my best self for me, my family, and my career. And to do that, it required saying no to certain things or certain people.
Yes, let's talk about the certain people. Ooh, let's go there.
Yeah, yeah. So I know, yeah, you and I spoke about this briefly in a previous conversation. And I think, culturally, uh, in the Hispanic community, um, you don't say no often, or we don't say no often. And breaking ties or creating distance is not looked at favorably.
Mhm.
And I do speak from experience for myself when I say that, in that time period that I talked about, like my mental health deteriorating, being a yes person, a people pleaser, um, I had to make changes. And some of those changes involved absolutely family members where, I thought, you are draining me. And I'm sure a lot of us on this call can probably think of one person or a couple that maybe do this, where you talk to them and it feels like the life just got sucked out of you,
Mm.
right? Because it's maybe the constant, problems or just negativity that is not adding any value or supporting me as an individual in any way, shape, or form. So I have had to make those hard disconnects with family, and I've also had to deal with the repercussions of it. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, I've made these really hard, sound decisions to stay true to myself and my values, as I talk about. And I think I lead with everything and anything.
That's so great. The power of having gone through it and spend some time with it. I think for early career, as you're navigating a shift or starting your career, so
Mhm.
much is changing. And then now you're trying to build and build your name and you're trying to get that going. What advice do you have for someone who maybe feels a little bit dragged down or doesn't know how to navigate maybe toxic relationships or what's supposed to be supportive isn't? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think that trust your gut, trust your intuition. I know for me, certain people that I kept around out of, obligation because they were family, inside I knew that I didn't need to keep them around, or that I didn't want them around. So if you
Mm.
have people like that in your life, I would encourage you to, be brave, as hard as it could feel, and deploy that courage to change the characters that you are surrounding yourself with. That's one thing. And I think there was a second part of that question, and I'm sorry, I forgot.
Oh, yes, yeah, how do you do that, right? How do you even what do you
Yeah,
do?
okay.
Overwhelming.
Yes. So I
Mhm.
think, for me, it was subtle. It wasn't cutthroat, like, we're not going to talk anymore, or I don't want to see you. No, it was just subtle. You start getting the invites for this and for that. And it's like, I'm sorry, I've got other things going on. I can't make it. Or sorry, thanks for the invite. Got other plans. And then slowly but surely, these people kind of pick up on it and they stop inviting you.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
one way to do it. And
Mhm.
then there was times where, if I was the one visiting a certain household to visit a certain someone, I try to plan it out in a way where I know that maybe certain individuals won't be there, or I cut my visit short to limit that toxicity or those behaviors that I didn't want pushed on me.
That's a great reminder. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And also a reminder that sometimes family or support or who you make it, right? It could be
Hmm.
friends, it could be different circles. We're
Yeah.
just so used to some of us tapping into one circle because that's what it's always been. But an
Hmm.
invitation to explore your other circles and who really supports you and what could that look like. But an important thing
Yeah.
to talk about because there's a it's a loaded one, I think, for so many of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking about that in your book. Any
Yep.
questions here? I'll pause for a moment. All right. I have a couple more questions and then we'll do some rapid pop fire and I'll make
Mhm.
sure that we wrap up at the hour. All right.
Okay.
What advice do you have for staying open and not being attached to the outcome?
Um, I would say focus on the goal, focus on the outcome that you're trying to achieve,
Mhm.
and enjoy the journey.
Mm,
Like, there's times where, I talked about obstacles or hiccups, things don't go to your liking. When you're going through this or growing through this,
yeah.
it's easy to just, get discouraged and feel like, what am I doing? But just, you're gonna find when you look back, you're gonna find all these wonderful gems. And
Mm.
again, I'll say these experiences that you gain from life, because that's what life really is. So I would say focus on the journey, not the outcome. And through it all, stay curious, stay true to yourself, and more importantly, be flexible and adaptable.
I love that. I love that because we sometimes get really caught up in, I need to get to point B.
Hmm.
And point B, point B, point B, that we forget all the magic that can happen along the way.
Yeah.
So important. I love that. Okay.
Hmm.
What do you wish someone told you or showed you back or early career back in those days? What comes up for you?
Um, well, we spent a little bit of time talking about that advocacy piece. And I think for me, had I known, and this is something I've noodled on quite a bit, here and there, no regrets, but I
Mhm.
often do wonder, find myself wondering, if I knew how to advocate for myself and use my voice earlier in my career, where would I be today? Or what would be different today? How would that have changed my career path, my trajectory, and my growth? So I would say that it would be, and that's something I have instilled in my kids, like advocate for yourself, ask for what you want. What's the worst that can happen? So I would say, yeah, that I wish I knew how to advocate for myself earlier on and use my voice without fear of rejection or, being told no.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is probably mine too. That's
Hmm.
that's what comes up for me because there's so much time wasted in, "Oh, what if I don't get that?" Or, "What if they say
Hmm.
no?" But what I
Hmm.
realize now is I was telling myself no, and that didn't take me anywhere, right?
Yeah.
It just didn't serve me. So that's probably one of the biggest things I would tell my younger self too, right? Just
Yeah.
and it's also a muscle. You're building a
Yeah.
muscle by practicing.
Yeah.
So what a great reminder. I love that. Okay. I love what Jessica just shared. Yes, and if you see someone who needs those skills, help them out so they don't struggle as much. Oh my goodness, helping each other. So what I love about what you just said there, Jessica, is that we need each other. We need to be supporting one another. And sometimes we need someone else to show us what we don't see out of fear, right? So you
Yeah.
could say, "Oh, it's okay to do that," or, "Oh, it sounds like you would be great for this. What can you try? Or how can I
Yeah.
support you in that?" So what
Yeah.
a great reminder. Thank you for sharing that. So, Jasmine, what is your favorite tip for how someone can
Yeah.
flourish in their
Yeah.
life and career? What is your one favorite thing that you like to tell everyone?
Yeah. I think it goes back to sort of how we started this conversation, right? Stay
Mhm.
rooted, stay true to who you are, know what your values are, and ensure that everything that you're doing aligns to them. And, find your purpose and fulfill it. I do believe that flourishing is not about perfection, it's about the progress and the growth in it all. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
I love that. I love that. Any questions from anyone here? We have a few minutes, and I do want to share something here in a moment.
Yes, I do have a question. So, Jasmine, when you're in a place of truly being rooted in your purpose and you're really feeling strong on top of your game, and then something happens in the company and it's like your legs are cut out from underneath you, like a layoff or a reorganization or something like that. How, and I know you've been through that. How do you deal with that and still maintain your conviction in who you are and what your purpose is? Uh-oh, I think she's frozen.
I think so too. We'll give her a second. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, you were frozen for a moment there.
Oh, sorry. I would say, I think for me, it's really important to remind myself to focus on what I actually can control.
Mm.
So for example, I shared that I was laid off mid last year and sure, it was, that was the first time I'd gone through layoffs. So it was a blow and you do kind of go through this, maybe I should have worked harder. Maybe there was something else I could have done to not get laid off. But at the end of the day, it was like, you know what, this was out of my control. I'm not going to focus on that. And I'm going to find the opportunity of this action, this moment that just happened. And for me, it was, what I shared. I have this time on my hands now. Thankfully, I'm so blessed that I was able to not have to jump into a job immediately. So with that time, I was able to focus on launching my business and my book, which absolutely was rooted in my purpose and my values.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. So I would love to share a little bit more about Jazmin and how to get her book. Can everyone see this?
Mm-hmm.
So I will keep this up while we continue the conversation. Any other questions from anyone here? We do have about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What's coming up for you? Any thoughts? Any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Jazmin, I have one thought. I
Mm-hmm.
know you spent about 5 years writing this book.
Mm-hmm.
And lots, like I said, it's very comprehensive, it's digestible. I wish it could fit in my back pocket. It's one of those things I wish everyone would get as a gift for, graduation or just kind of making a change. I think this is so great.
Mm-hmm.
After you've had time with the book and you're thinking about what's next, is there a chapter you would add? What would you add? Well, what did you feel like, oh, I want to spend more time thinking about this? Is there anything?
Oh. Yes, there's one specifically, but I need to do more research and have some thoughtful conversations with experts in this field.
Mm-hmm.
And it's women in leadership.
Ooh, yeah.
I've gotten a taste of it. I've walked the walk for some time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much there. And when I say so much, I think that's where when I mentioned talking to experts and other professionals, get different perspectives. Um, there's just so much there to unpack, and I'd love to be able to do that. So potentially it could be Ignite Your Growth Part 2.
Yes. Okay. You heard it here, everyone. Love that. Okay. Let's get into rapid fire unless anyone else has some questions, and we'll wrap this up. Any questions? Okay. All right, Jazmin. It is lunchtime here, Pacific time. What is your favorite appetizer or dessert on a menu?
Ooh, appetizer, bruschetta.
Oh, yes.
Dessert. I mean, most restaurants that offer dessert don't have like fruta and chamoy because that would win every time. But anything fruity, whether it's a sorbet, a cake, a piece of pie, anything fruity works.
Love that. Love that. Okay. What is your walk-up song?
Ooh. Um, I'm gonna say probably without the lyrics, the beat from Sophie Tucker's Best Friend. It's an
Oh,
amazing bass line. If you heard it, if you haven't, go look it up and listen. It's got a real deep, awesome, empowering bass that I just love.
I think I'm going to hear that a little differently now moving forward.
Yeah. No, it totally turns on that, like, all right, I got the confidence. I'm gonna walk it out. Let's go. I lost your audio.
Past or present? Who would you like to interview?
Híjole. I would have loved to have a conversation with Frida Kahlo.
What would
Such
you
an
ask?
inspirational woman who just did so much and had such an interesting, controversial life. I think a conversation with her would just be epic and unforgettable.
Wow. And there's so much we would learn, so much more. I feel like there's so much to still dig into. That's
Mhm.
a great one. I love that. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jazmin. Thank you for imparting your wisdom, sharing a little bit more about your book. So great to have everyone here today. Thank you for, gosh, there's so much great stuff in this. I really hope that um, you all explore this book, you all kind of go back to this interview. And Jazmin is doing a lot. Jazmin is talking to quite a few people. There's some upcoming things really kind of digging into the book that are really exciting and we're looking forward to. So please do share your LinkedIn, Jazmin. I invite you all to connect with her on
Yes.
LinkedIn. Let's connect with each other if we're not already connected. Here we go. And yes, thank you for your questions. Really appreciate your engagement today. Thank you.
Yep. Sylvia, for having me, and thanks to those of you.
Thank you. Great to see
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.